everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on 7 ways to prime your audience. I want you to think about going to the movies, a movie you've been anticipating, and you're building up the suspense, the anticipation, and the sort of things you do to go to a movie, the planning of the transport, the smell of the popcorn, what are you going to take in to eat, who you're going to go with, and just the overall before you go to the movie experience. Now, I want to try and translate some of that to before you go to a workshop. So as a presenter, as a facilitator, as a trainer, what can we do to help people smoothly, to prime them, to anticipate the upcoming workshop, to set the scene and make it a really positive experience? So welcome to 7 ways to prime your audience before your presentation, before your workshop, before your conference that you're speaking at. So Peter Dew's my name. It's a real pleasure to be here. My passion is helping people be more effective, confident and influential in their public speaking and presentation skills. Seven ways to prime your audience, 7 ways to get the audience ready to go into your room. For those of you who haven't been on my webinars before, please ask questions as we go, take notes, participate, think and apply. So which of these 7 strategies might you adapt to your own needs or adopt, so that the next time you're running a workshop, you're going to do something just to help welcome people, get their anticipation going? So the first one, do an icebreaker. What are you going to do to make people feel at home, relaxed as they go into the room? Now, with icebreakers, they need to be welcoming, they need to be inclusive, and they need to be relevant. There are some icebreakers that I've seen done at workshops that bear no relationship to what I'm about to learn in that workshop. For me, my learning style, I think, what a waste of time. For example, how far did you have to travel today to come to this workshop? Line up, have a chat, line up in distance. The closest person to this point had the shortest distance to travel, and the person who moves furthest away has the longest distance to travel. And you have a chat. Yeah, I traveled 5 kilometers, I traveled 50, I came up from Mount Barker, 450 kilometers, and we line them up. All right, now let's get into time management training. What does that icebreaker have to do with the workshop you're delivering? And the answer is nothing. So just breaking the ice and sort of having a chat, unless it's relevant, many people will reject that icebreaker. So do something that leads us to where you're going to be talking about. For example, when I do a workshop on overcoming fear of public speaking, I ask people who's afraid of being in front of 100, 200, 300 people, who is not that comfortable, and I'll get people to put their hand up. Then I'll move on to another question, who is uncomfortable when they're presenting at conferences? And then another question, who would improved public speaking help their jobs, their everyday performance, their everyday life? And eventually I'll go around the room and I'll have 100% of hands raised, so that I know that they're in the right room, they're in the right workshop for dealing with their fear of speaking. Another thing that I'll do is I'll get people to introduce themselves and say, what do you do? 30 seconds, introduce yourself, and how do you make a difference in your workplace? Then I'll deconstruct that in that they've just delivered their 30-second elevator speech. Do you all have your elevator speeches prepared? And the answer is no. And the workshop that I'll be teaching them is how to pitch yourself, how to pitch your idea, how to pitch your business, in networking events, at conferences, wherever it may be, and it's your 30-second elevator pitch that's going to decide whether people glaze over or if they say, can you tell me more about that, Peter? So they're two icebreakers I do that relate directly to the workshop that's about to follow. So people now know they're in the right room for the information, for the problem, the issue that they have. The second one, pre-workshop instructions. Make it as smooth as you can. Send people Google Maps. Let them know where the free parking is. I'm running some workshops in April and May, and we're using Kalis Brothers here in Leederville, and they offer free parking. But you need a code, a 4-pin code, and the gate drops and people can drive in. And this is almost in the city of Perth. Free parking for my workshop. It's also next to a train station. So should you catch the train, it is a 1-minute walk from Leederville train station to Kalis Brothers training room. I always check in, does anyone have any allergies, dietary requirements, so that people know that they're going to be catered for them. They're not going to have to worry about, can I get some soy milk, please? I'd like some soy milk for my tea. The instructions I send out, because I set my training rooms at 22 degrees. That is cold. Most trainers, where they have control over the air conditioning, will set the room cold, because people don't fall asleep in cold rooms. And a lot of people will complain about, this is really cold. So I ask people to dress in layers. Even in the 40-degree days that Perth has, bring layers along, because the air conditioning may be too cold. You can put your coat on. If you get too hot, you can take your coat off. And in some of my workshops, pens and notepads along with Kalis's that I mentioned. They'll provide everyone with a nice workbook, a nice notepad, a nice branded pen, some mints, and all of that's on the table. So when you walk in, if you've brought nothing, you're good to go. When I go to mine sites, it often takes place in a training room, a donga that's got no equipment, no support whatsoever. And the number of people who turn up with no notepad and no pen, and within the first 10-15 minutes they're excited and they want to get the content I'm sharing, and they say, oh Peter, do you have a pen or a piece of paper I can borrow? Make it clear so that people walk into the room, they know what to expect, they've got everything anticipated, they've got all bases covered. Too cold, not a problem. Pen and paper, I'm really good. I don't have to worry about my food allergies. I know where to park, I know how to get there. And even when there's no free parking, I'll let people know the 2 or 3 closest car parks where they can park. It's paid parking. One might be Wilson's car parking, one might be City of Perth car parking, but then they have a choice depending where they're coming. And I always provide a public transport route where possible, so a bus number. I want it to make it easy for you so you're not stressed, you're relaxed, you can arrive on time, you don't have to look for parking. What pre-workshop instructions could you send out to make it easier and smoother for people coming to your presentation, to your workshop, to your facilitation? Can we add anything to that? What other pre-workshop instructions can you think of that you might add? Another one is the breaks. So I let people know they're going to have a 45-minute lunch break or a 30-minute lunch break. I do some contract work for a corporate trainer in Perth, and they give a 60-minute break. And just the break times, because sometimes people want to pay bills at lunchtime, they want to go to the post office. Knowing the length of break will also help people that day run smoothly for them. Do a pre-workshop exercise. I could send you a journal article to read, a blog post to read. Now, those of you who are interested on icebreakers, I have written a blog post. It'll be on LinkedIn and it'll also be on my website, www.corporatecommunicationexperts.com.au, on icebreakers, using icebreakers for your presentation. I could send that link to that article out for you to read before you come along to this webinar, before you come along to my workshop on how to do icebreakers. Send out a case study. If your particular line of work is maybe around financial planning, around social housing, around mental health and mental well-being, send out a case study to review. I sometimes send out a pre-workshop survey. What's the biggest issue you face within your public speaking? What skills would you like most from me today? And that survey comes back to me before the workshop, and I can now tailor my content to match your needs. One of the biggest issues with public speaking, and where you will lose your audience, is when the audience comes along, this is what they're expecting. Yep, they need this. And the speaker delivers this. And there's a mismatch between communications and expectations. When you do a pre-workshop survey, sometimes called an audience audit, what you'll get is an easier task of matching expectations with message. I get people to prepare a topic. So I mentioned the icebreaker speech. So what do you do? How do you make a difference to your clients? I could send that out beforehand. Can you come along with letting us know what you do? 30 seconds, if you're asked in 30 seconds to describe your job and what you do, what would that be? So when I ask that question, that icebreaker, people have done a bit of preparation. I'm running a presentation skills workshop, and it's going to be run online, 4 90-minute sessions. So at the end of each session, I'm going to give people a topic to prepare and come along in a week later to present on Zoom, which I can then record, and then I can do coaching on their video recording of their presentation. What pre-workshop exercise can you ask your audience to do before they come? So they're ready, they've got some knowledge or skills that's going to help them maximize their learning, and maybe even builds their anticipation, shows them, wow, this is going to be tailored for me. I'm really excited to be attending this workshop. Set the room up right. So when people walk into the room, it's good, it's perfect. I mentioned room temperature. That's set up for you so you stay awake, but probably for me at 22 degrees. So you may feel cold, but what it does is it keeps you awake and energized. 23, 24, you're more likely to zone out, you're more likely to doze. Make the lighting good. Now, sometimes the lighting needs to be down to enable the PowerPoint slide or the video on the screen to be well displayed. Sometimes you need to turn lights up and down, so have a dimmer. Water on the table, mints. And I sometimes bring minties, and when I give a tough question for thinking and speaking off the cuff, and you know that saying, there's times like these when you need a minty, I can then hand out a minty as someone's trying to think of an answer to the question, and that just breaks the tension a little bit. The general ambience of the room, sugar treats after lunch, low energy, but not sugar all day. And I sometimes do relaxing music as people walk into the room, and there is that science that the 4-beat music, now I don't understand music, but I think it's the Mozarts and the Beethovens, they do the 4-beat time, is conducive for learning. And I'll use that music when people come into the room, and then I'll turn the music off while I'm presenting. And then if I get you to do some brainstorming or some teamwork, I might just put the music back at a low rate in the background. So sort of thinking music. What can you do to set up your room so that when people walk in, they're smelling the popcorn, metaphorically? They're anticipating that this is right. Do a pre-workshop seminar. Do a short webinar. Do a podcast. This webinar I'm doing now could be a pre-workshop seminar that sets you up and leads you into a workshop you might be attending face-to-face next week. So you can invite people. So you have 10 people register, 15 people register, and you say, right, I'm just going to run a 15-minute intro session that everyone's welcome to attend, and it's just going to set the scene and prepare you for next week's workshop. And if you can't attend, I'm going to record it and make that available for you. It's worth your while attending or watching this pre-workshop webinar. It's going to really set the scene and make the workshop more beneficial to you. It's going to increase your learning, and that's going to add value to you. So you can use it to provide some background information to set the scene of what the learning is going to be. You can cover some pre-workshop material and deal with issues and concerns. So deal with the elephant in the room before people go in the room. So some people come to my workshops and they worry that I'm going to make them stand up and do public speaking. And this really causes some people concern and some sleepless nights. Let me assure you that I'm going to invite you to stand up and speak, but I'm not going to make you stand up and speak. And I'll ask you to only speak when you feel you're ready or when you feel that you're comfortable. How could you use a pre-workshop webinar, a pre-workshop Teams meeting, just a pre-workshop chat? A pre-workshop coaching session. My wife runs a Women in Leadership Masterclass. It's an 8-week program, 2-day immersion, and then lots of follow-up. But before they do the masterclass, where they have 15 women in the room together, each individual gets a 30-minute pre-coaching call. And this pre-coaching call does 2 things for my wife, Violet. Number one, it sets the scene for the people on what to expect and about the pre-work they're going to do, some surveys, some personality type scores, how you behave when you're under pressure. So they've done all that before, so it sets that expectations, it sets that scene. Also, it helps Violet understand their expectations, their issues, and so that when Violet walks into the room to run the 2-day masterclass, people are not strangers, and she understands the expectations. How can you use a pre-workshop seminar to set the scene, to prime your audience, your workshop attendees? We mentioned some pre-workshop readings, some blogs. I like to send out videos or a TED talk. One of the things, if I'm doing a workshop on non-verbal communication, so that's your hands, your facial expressions, I will send people to the Amy Cuddy TED talk. That is the Amy Cuddy TED talk. So let me just put that in for you. And Amy talks about body language. And she talks about how your nonverbal communication, your body language, determines who you are, determines how you are seen, how you are perceived. And she's also written a great book called Presence, and it's about how you show up and remain calm while under fire, and avoiding fig leaves and passive stances and avoiding aggressive stances. All of this I can send to you just to view, so that when you come along to my non-verbal communication workshop and we're going to work on your body language, you've got a little bit of basic knowledge and some science from Amy that may help you. Yeah, there's a whole host of TED Talks out there that can lead into, that can help people prepare for your workshop. Simon Sinek, Start With Why. You might be working on core messages and what you do. And part of your elevator pitch is, so this is what you do, this is the problem you solve, but a more important question is, so why are you doing it? Why are you, what's your motivation behind that? Make the place safe. And yes, physically safe. So this is the COVID safe. And I'm observing the 4 square metre here in Perth. However, the government has imposed a 2 square metre rule. All that means is I make sure I have a room that is big enough with my 10, 12, 15 people would be my max, that regardless of how many people, 10, 12, 15, the room exceeds the 4 square metre rule. I will have hand sanitizer. I won't do the handshake. I'll do just a formal introduction. We'll wear masks, but we'll take the masks off when we speak. But here's the other important thing, the psychological safety. I mentioned part of the pre-work dealing with those common questions. Do I have to speak? I will reiterate that in my workshop, that I'm going to ask you to come up and speak off the cuff on questions you haven't prepared for, that you don't know the answer, but I'm going to teach you the model first, then I'm going to invite you to speak on a particular question. This is off the cuff speaking, thinking and speaking off the cuff. Please rest assured, if you do not know the answer, feel free to pass, or feel free to say, Peter, can you pick another person? So your participation is completely voluntary. I want to make it you feel comfortable and safe, and we can do that before you walk in the room and when you at the start of the meeting. If you feel safe, if you feel comfortable, if you feel connected, then you're more likely to learn, more likely to participate and have a positive experience and smell that popcorn. So my question, what are you going to do to prime your audience? There's just some thoughts that I use. Do an icebreaker, sets the scene and leads us into what we're going to learn. Send out some pre-workshop instructions. Here's how to park. Here's the train route. A pre-work exercise. Set up the room right. Do a webinar. Send out a video, a TED Talk, a video that you've made yourself. And make the place safe, psychologically and also physically safe in these COVID times. My next webinars, for those of you who like to enjoy these free 30-minute webinars, 6 relaxation techniques before public speaking. You're going to a conference, you're a keynote speaker, there's 200 people in the room, scary stuff. What do you do to relax? 7 ways to start your presentation. First 30 seconds matters. Grab people's attention. Set the scene. And some guidelines to ensure a successful Q&A session. So you've now done your presentation and you're going to question and answer. This is where many people start to fall to bits. They struggle to respond, their credibility goes down, their confidence goes down, and their look, sure, look, I'll see if I can, I'm not really sure. How do you remain confident? And here's some guidelines to help you do a great Q&A session. The online workshops, How to negotiate saying no. This is Violet's workshop. 90 minutes, one-off session, 28th of March. My winning presentation skills, 4 sessions. Session number 1, 29th of March. Still got room for both winning presentation skills and speaking off the cuff. 4 sessions starting on the 14th of April for off the cuff, 29th of March for presentation skills. Anyone who enrolls for both will get a discount. These are paid online workshops. These are not the free 30-minute seminars. You know how to contact me. I'd really welcome your feedback. I'd also love other ideas on what you'd like to hear from me in the future. I create these webinars to serve you, to provide you with skills, update information, to help you be more confident and more effective in your presentation skills. Thanks for your participation. I'm going to wrap up 5 minutes early. Any last questions? But my question to you is, how are you going to prime your audience? The metaphor I started with, you're going to the movie, smelling the popcorn, starting to salivate, starting to anticipate this movie experience. You're going to do an icebreaker, some pre-workshop instructions, pre-workshop exercise, a survey, set up the room right, do a webinar, send a video, make the place safe. Thanks everyone, and this is Peter Dew, wishing you all the best in your public speaking and presentation skills journey.